and welcome to this new section where we're going to talk about how can we determine gaps in existing client systems and as is process. I am Arun Singhal, your management coach and mentor with 40 years of experience in people development. So, what are we going to do today in this section is to give you an in-depth understanding of how can you determine gaps in existing client systems and as is processes that can help you build excellence in solution design. And in this section, there are four things that we're going to do. One, we're going to talk about what is the overall approach. Then we will start talking about how do we document as is processes. Then we talk about identifying customer requirements. And finally, how do we analyze the processes to determine the gaps. And in this lecture, we begin by taking a look at the overall approach. Right? Ready for that? Great, wonderful. So, how do you think you can determine the gaps in existing as is processes and systems? What's your thoughts? Okay, what I have for you here is a process that we use to determine the gaps in existing as is processes. It starts with identifying the right processes because you need to identify the right processes that will provide the greatest value to the customer because that is our objective of the solution design, right? Then we need to document the as is process. So those processes that are critical and right for us to deliver the solution design in most optimal way, we need to document them. And in that documentation process, and subsequent to that, we need to identify what are the customer requirements. The customer here meaning the customer of the process. So we have a process that we want to identify the right process. We are documenting, and there we need to identify the customer of that process. And then we analyze the process. And we'll talk about each of these as we go forward in subsequent lectures. So let's look at the first step. How do we identify the right processes? Any thoughts? Any thoughts on how do we identify the right processes? Okay, so there are three things you need to look at in identifying the right processes. First, you need to look at the importance. So look at most critical and influential processes in terms of customer satisfaction. In customer meaning your customer, for whom are we trying to develop a solution design. We are trying to develop a solution or design a solution and that we want to do in an excellent way. So most critical and this could be achieved in many ways by discussing with the client, watching and seeing which processes are driving the key result areas, the key business issues that the client is facing. And we take a look at those processes and identify a list of those processes. Second, out of those processes, we look at which processes are most dysfunctional, which are performing at the best, because the whole idea of this is to provide greatest value, and the greatest value will come from those processes that are performing at the lowest level at this point of time and are relevant and most important. And the third thing we should need to look at is the feasibility to improve, the low-hanging fruits, which the ones that you can quickly make improvements in those processes which are most dysfunctional and important, and you are able to do that quickly working along with the client because the proof of pudding is in eating it, right? So faster you can deliver the value to the client, the happier the client will be, right? Wonderful. So where do we go from here in the next lecture? So in this lecture, after having looked at how do we identify the right processes, we look at how do we document the as-is process of one of those processes. And you can repeat that for the remaining processes. Right, so thank you so much for watching this first lecture on how can we determine gaps in existing systems, client systems, and as-is processes. Hope you're beginning to get an idea of how to begin this whole process, and I also hope that you are beginning to enjoy this section, and I look forward to seeing you again in the next lecture. We will talk about how to start mapping the right process for as this process.